welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today is one of India's most exciting, innovative, creative theatre directors with a long personal history of excellence that has spanned more than 40 productions in India and abroad. She currently is the chairperson, and that's incidental to her very distinguished theatre career, chairperson of the National School of Drama. I'm delighted to welcome Amal Allana. Chairperson of the National School of Drama. How does that feel? You've been sort of this uninhibited, free bird creating theatre for all your life, and you now head India's premier theatre institution. Does that feel sort of a burden?
Not a burden, but definitely, yes, a responsibility of sorts. Yeah, responsibility of sorts. But I think I'm quite challenged in my own way with the whole proposition, because NSD is something which stands for newness and stands for wonderful training in the theatre, and I'm very keen on that.
That, you know, it's pretty much in your bloodstream, in a sense, that your father was a director, and he was and sort of Abraham Al-Qazi, an iconic director of National School of Drama. You were a student. There,
sure.
And in a sense, you've had a long association, with the institution, and here is this opportunity now to impact it in more substantial ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have a very long association, because besides being a student there myself, I think really I have worked with large numbers of the graduates of the National School of Drama, which has in a way created, we are a community of theatre people who work together, who are the alumni. So we do have similar ideas, we were brought up on similar ideas together, and it is indeed a great challenge for me today to see what my experience of the last 35 years doing theatre, what I can bring, because I think I have a certain amount of experience of the outside world and its problems, and I wish to see that together with what is happening in the school comes to create a new kind of a reality for the theatre.
In the everyday reality of everyday living, what is the role and space for theatre, and why is it important?
It actually has the capacity to represent the pulse of a people, what people feel, what people think, how they tick. And I think the challenge in doing theatre is to constantly keep abreast of this ticking quality. And the moment we become complacent, and the moment we go into isms and say that this is the kind of theatre that we need, then I think that's dead theatre. That doesn't represent the moment. So the theatre's aliveness to the moment is its most essential quality, and if you want to be a theatre person, you have to be constantly alive to people, to situations.
You mentioned this ticking quality, and historically, in terms of the sort of origins of theatre, as it were, it certainly in India, it was something that was very close to the people.
Sure.
And we now sort of have the sense of the National School of Drama,
yes,
in this sort of very elitist institution, which has produced some outstanding actors and some extravagant sort of large productions. And we really don't get a sense of it being close to the people, either in terms of the content it creates, the kind of plays it performs, or the agendas of the people who seem to sort of graduate from it. I mean, there are exceptions, people like you, Nasruddin Shah. I mean, there are, obviously, but over the long decades. So what kind of agenda are you setting for the National School of Drama?
Well, I think that is part of the agenda, to open things up for discussion, to create and try a new interplay of systems of teaching. I think we have to become much more, on the one hand, local, and on the other hand, global. Of course, the local and the global sounds very pat, but I think that this transition. I don't think a National School of Drama needs to have some kind of a national identity. I think the identity of theatre lies in its people, and lies in its individuals, and lies in the regions, but not necessarily in terms of regional theatre. And I think that is the challenge, because today one can jump from the periphery into the world. You don't have to really navigate through a center to go out.
Give us an example.
For example, I think that if you are doing a traditional form of theatre, you don't have to sort of come to a consensus about how that will feed into a sort of a pan-national or a national identity. This is what we were doing in the 60s and 70s and 80s. We were trying to create an identity for theatre which was a so-called Indian identity. And we were looking at sources, and we were looking at performing traditions and going back to them. So we have passed through that phase of theatre, I think. And today I think the individual director or actor can take what he wants from tradition, and instead of tradition being something very sacrosanct, which it is on the one hand, but it is something you can play with. And I think this playfulness and this playing around with your own culture can help you and project you out into the world, and you don't necessarily have to have a sort of a heavy and try and carve out for yourself this heavy Indian identity.
What is a uniquely Indian tradition of theatre that you feel still has vitality, that we might build on and experiment, that by its nature is close to the rhythms and the essence of people? I mean, you have people like Habib Tanveer who are doing theatre very close to the people and working with people who are not trained. But what is, in the classical sense, what is our heritage that we can hold up and wave a flag?
On the one hand, we in the urban centers have a very hybrid heritage. We have taken from the West, taken from our own traditions, and I think that the culture which is produced in the cities has this eclectic mix of different cultures and streams coming in, very much like contemporary writing in English, in the English language. But I think that what we still have as a tremendous source is our performing traditions. And these still hold a lot for us to learn from. In fact, a whole methodology of teaching acting, for example, where we have relied tremendously on the so-called Stanislavskian system, etc., which is Western in its approach, because the whole Stanislavskian system, if I may just deviate for a moment, really builds on you from the inside out, whereas our Indian traditions really go from the outside in. So when you are studying a form, whether it's a Yakshagan or it's Kathakali, etc., you go from the gestures and the postures and things that you learn, and then slowly imbibe it over a period of time till you begin to understand it, and you build your character therefore from what it appears to be to what it feels. You don't go from feeling outward, but you go from the image inward. Our tradition is very scientific, but we have to understand all these legacies separately, and there has to be some person who comes along, as great maybe as Stanislavski, but one of our Indians, who pulls it all together and create a methodology for teaching and creating the modern Indian actor. And I would say the Indian actor is different from a Western actor, because an Indian actor, the way he uses his body, the way he just plays around with gestures and his own body, is entirely different, I think, from a Western actor in one sense, though of course one can have international parameters to judge acting.
We'll be right back for more on that. You're watching a conversation with the chairperson of the National School of Drama, Amal Allana, but I hasten to sort of add again that far beyond being the chairperson, she's a creative, innovative, iconic figure almost in contemporary Indian theatre. We'll be right back. I have a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with Amal Allana. Do you think Amal Allana could be the Stanislavski-like figure that you feel Indian theatre needs?
No.
Why not? What do you lack?
No, I think that one needs each director in India would love to be the Stanislavski of this new methodology which I'm talking about. But I think we need to, you see, it has to be a person who is grounded in tradition. I think that would have to be as there in the first place. and then perhaps, not necessarily be one person, but maybe two people, maybe a group of people. Maybe this can be explored and found out within a group and an ensemble of actors as they explore.
But in the context of the globalization of culture and the globalization of all art forms, isn't the likelihood of this happening sort of diminishing every day?
What?
Of this, of an Indian method, of an Indian identity to approaching something evolving? Look, we've even failed, and this is just sort of a parallel question in a sense. We've even failed to create quality writing that's close to our people, that's close to our impulses, our culture. Much of the theatre that the NSD is doing tends to be, borrowed feathers, translations of Western scripts.
Yeah.
So where is this going to happen? Is it going to happen?
Well, I think, theatre goes through a period of, passing the buck. At one time the playwright is the center of the action, at one time the actor, and then in the last so many years, the director has been the fulcrum of the group and really decides what is to happen. And I think more and more, even in the Indian context, what I'm really talking about is the cooperation of all members of the group, the actors, the directors, the designers, to create theatre. So this lacuna we have felt in writing, for example, has been already and has begun to be filled by people creating their own texts. You see this happening all the time. This is a very new and a very exciting trend, because it can start with anything. It can start and be built around a novel. It can be built around an idea. It can be built around anything. It can be built around a piece of history. So this creation, and I think this interplay, and I think this is the exciting part of theatre now, is that it is no longer the director who sort of runs the show and is the controller of the whole show, but it's become a much more democratic process where the director has begun to understand a large part that performance plays. We were doing literature, we were doing dramatic literature as theatre. Today we are trying to create performance as theatre, which is slightly different. You're going directly into performance without navigating literature and interpreting literature.
In what ways has this sort of the imperative of the live performance been impacted by cinema? And you see certainly in terms of the popular commercial theatre in the West, it's getting larger, it's getting more, it's huge, they have large lavish sets and technology and electronics and what have you, trying to sort of compete with the mise-en-scène in the sense that cinema is creating.
Right.
What is unfolding in India? Do we face a similar kind of threat?
Threat, of course, cinema and television have always been envisaged as threats to theatre, but I think now in the last so many years, certainly in the last 10 years, you see that audiences are returning to the theatre. I think audiences miss this live contact. To a certain extent, I think they know what television has to offer. And it cannot really substitute the live performance. And I think what they really go to see, and I think which is the most powerful aspect of theatre, is not huge sets and lights and costumes, but when it is human interactions which you actually can see and feel, and they're sensuous and they're just so real to you. I think this is the most important part of theatre, and I think people love that. And they're coming back for it, and therefore, though theatre doesn't have to be actor-centric, because in our tradition, unfortunately, we haven't really played on the whole visual aspect of theatre. It hasn't been explored enough. We don't have these great sets, which they do in the West. So the interaction of technology and theatre and the live actor, of course, is wonderful. But still one can create something very, very pertinent and very, very beautiful out of very simple means, which I think more and more people are going towards.
In this process of creation for you as a theatre director, where and how do you begin? You obviously begin with the script, or is it sort of looking for an idea that you want to see expressed on stage? To what degree do you feel confined, that it's someone else's script? What draws you to a script? Is it the potential for performance? Is it your empathy with the character that is going to portray, because it's saying something that your inner voice wants to say? What are the dimensions that draw you to a script?
I think that over time, when I look back in retrospect about why have I chosen or selected these plays, I think they're very close to my own search. My own search as a person, my own search is trying to locate myself within this vast India. Who am I? The perennial question, who am I as an Indian, who am I as a woman? These I think have, and I've never known that I have selected a play. So whether I selected Mother Courage, and I did it as Himmat Mai, and I did a man doing the role, Manohar Singh doing the role, or whether thereafter I selected a play like Begum Barve, or now my latest play, which is the Garcia Marquez Erendira, and her heartless grandmother. I think the imperatives are that it connects with you personally as a person, and I don't think one can do anything beyond what one is concerned with, because then one will not be true to oneself and one's journey. Where your journey and the journey of others, I think there's always a point of contact, and you don't aim for that point of contact. But I think references, if one is true to the text, I mean, they arise out of themselves, and of course the other actors are always there to bring that other point of view, which you yourself, because our interactions are so close.
You know, I've always been fascinated by a play script. It really represents, in most cases, most playwrights will give you what is the end of a process of intellectualization, of emotions, of feelings, of histories, and what have you, and you just see the final words,
right.
Which are presented,
Absolutely.
which you then, as the director working with the actor, go back words from to create the sort of the background, the presence, the layers of meaning and intensity that will then communicate to the audience. And that's what makes it exciting to have different directors direct the same play.
Sure.
What is this process for you? You look at the script, you then sort of go through this understanding and the layering of it, and is it then, I wouldn't say completely frozen, because it must to some degree remain dynamic, but do you then sort of visualize the play complete and then go out and see how it unfolds, and with some modifications, of course? To what degree is it locked in?
Well, I think, I think that the exciting part of my work has been that I have changed in my process towards a play. Whereas earlier I looked on that script with sort of a lot of fear and trepidation. Oh my God, I have to sort of understand this. But I think the process has become very, very loose and creative and flowing. And it's a process where you just pull it all apart, bit by bit and strand by strand, and these link up. So you might just hop onto a Garcia Marquez word or a sentence, and that leads itself into a scene and wove itself into a scene. And I have to say, as one grows older, I think this whole process becomes more and more and more enjoyable and less and less daunting. Because that is the journey of trying to follow, rather than trying to follow what did Shakespeare mean by this word. It is more that how that just releases something in you, and that you then, it becomes a point of takeoff and a creative point of takeoff, and that's what I find fascinating about dealing. So mine has a lot to do with processes, and I encourage the actors to do the same. So that we don't feel that this is something, this Bible in front of us, we have to represent it properly, otherwise we would be doing a great injustice to it. I think we need to
You're watching a conversation with the great theatre director Amal Allana. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with Amal Allana. Sort of the way you describe the process, it has this wonderful quality of playfulness to it. When does it sort of come together? When do you get your peak cataclysmic gratification from it? Performance, when it's with the first public performance is over, the audience has seen it and they've applauded. Dress rehearsal, now it's over. I've done my bit. It's over to the actors and the stage management. When does it sort of come complete for you?
There's no saying when it's complete, but it's complete when it's complete. And then as the director, you do see that it's taken a shape. When you feel the rhythms of the play are there in place, when you feel that the actors have got under the whole thing, when you feel, of course, all the visual elements in the play are in place, when you feel the whole thing is taken shape, there's a terrible time when you're extremely fearful that it's going to all collapse. And then there comes another time where you think, there is a glimmer of a shape. And I think that once you are a little bit reassured, because you're your worst critic, and once you're kind of reassured that there is some shape in it, and then you get a boost to tidy it up and neaten it up, and then you begin to know as the director what you have to do to get it to its final shape. I find that the most exciting moment, that I think I've got somewhere near what I imagined it would be.
You're sort of chairperson of the National School of Drama, and I've just we've painted this picture of this great national institute. But you also run your own institution, and you and your husband Nisar have been sort of are legendary, certainly in our community and in Delhi and in the area here, for your work, grassroots work, working with young people, and really cultivating the real impulses of theatre. What is the aspiration? What is it that drives this effort, this initiative, the struggles, the processes, away from the grandeur of
well,
national
I can tell
institutions?
you, I can tell you certain madness. That's all it is. We're driven by total madness. We're driven by just the urge to do yet one more project, and yet one more project which would be even more difficult than the previous one. I think that Nisar and I have really been able to do whatever we do because we don't think too much about how we're going to do it.
Obviously, sort of, whether as director and an actor, certainly in these two dimensions of theatre, of playing someone else, of experiencing someone else's, emotions and identity, must do amazing things to you, to your evolution, to your growth, to your insight, to your understanding. So what transformations have you felt, in what ways have you felt changed from the time you were a little girl, with your brother Faisal and in your father's sort of plays, running around, getting props and being backstage, to now being sort of this great icon. So what has it given you? What has theatre given you?
I think theatre has given me, more than anything else, this great sense of living in the moment and trying to live in the moment, and rather than anticipating the next thing that's going to be happening to you, it forces you continuously to just think about what's happening right now. And that's a great sense of liberation. It's a great sense of freedom. It's a great sense of I don't know how to describe it. It's just, you just float. You just fly. And those hours that you spend with the actors in the rehearsal are the most exciting because you receive from them such amazing insights. They do things which they don't even know that they're doing. And I think that when we create an atmosphere where people can vibe with one another and can talk to one another in other words than in the mundane, I think that that's kind of spiritual, I would say even spiritual sense of elation which one receives.
And at the end of your tenure as the chairperson of the National School of Drama, what would you like to have left behind?
I would definitely like to just inculcate a great sense of passion for the theatre, a great sense, but I also think it is very, very important. Finally, we have come of age. We cannot train students without knowing where they go. All that has to feed into a theatre movement, and until we don't look at the outside of the school and the inside of the school as being correlated and as one totally offering itself, the student comes out and offers himself to the theatre, and then he has no place to go. And this is a very, very sad situation which somehow or the other we have to, mend and do things about, both inside and outside.
Amal Allana, thank you very much. This has been a great privilege.
Thank you so
and a
much.
great learning
Thank
experience.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.